Right now, in this very moment, you're thinking. But here's what nobody tells you. Those thoughts are doing absolutely nothing. They're powerless, empty, until you discover the one invisible moment that changes everything. You've been told your whole life that your thoughts create your reality. Think positive, they say. Visualize your dreams, they promise. But you've tried that, haven't you? You've sat there, eyes closed, imagining the life you want, thinking the right thoughts, feeling the right feelings. And yet, nothing changes. Here's why. You've been missing the sacred moment. The mystical instant that Genevieve Behrend herself discovered over a century ago, the same moment that transformed her from a struggling woman with nothing into one of the most prosperous students of mental science the world has ever known. What if I told you that between your thought and your reality lies an invisible bridge, and that bridge only materializes in one specific moment? Miss that moment, and your thoughts evaporate into the void. Catch it, and the entire universe reorganizes itself around your desire. If you're ready to discover this hidden moment, the one that makes your thoughts finally work, subscribe now and activate the notification bell. Because what you're about to learn has been hidden in plain sight for over 100 years, and most people will never find it. Let me take you on a journey into the mystical teachings of Genevieve Behrend, and together we'll unlock the moment that changes everything. The great illusion of thinking. In 1912, a woman stood on the edge of complete ruin. Genevieve Behrend had nothing. No money, no prospects, no visible way forward. But she had heard of a man named Thomas Troward, a judge and mystical philosopher living in England, who understood the secret laws of mind. She wanted to study with him. There was only one problem. She had no money for the journey, and Troward had announced he would take no more students. What happened next would reveal the very secret we're exploring today. Behrend didn't just think about studying with Troward. Thousands of people probably thought about it. She didn't just wish for it or hope for it. She did something else entirely, something that exists in a dimension beyond mere thought. She accessed the mystical moment. But before we reveal what that moment is, we must first understand why your thoughts by themselves do nothing. You see, thought is like a seed. A seed sitting on a table is not a tree. It has all the potential of the tree within it: the roots, the trunk, the branches, the leaves, the fruit. Everything is encoded in that tiny seed, but leave it on the table for 100 years and it remains just a seed. Potential unrealized, power dormant. This is where most people live their entire lives. They generate thoughts constantly, beautiful thoughts, powerful thoughts, thoughts of abundance, love, success, and freedom. These thoughts are real seeds containing entire universes of possibility, but they remain on the table of consciousness, never planted, never germinated, never growing into reality. Behrend understood something profound that most people miss. The universe is not moved by thought alone. The universe is moved by thought that has undergone a specific transformation. She called it the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but it goes deeper than what we typically mean by feeling. Let me explain. When you think about what you want, you're operating in the realm of subject and object. There is you, the subject, and there is the thing you want, the object. This creates separation. And in that separation, your thought has no power because the universe doesn't recognize separation. It only recognizes oneness. This is the great illusion that keeps your thoughts powerless. You think, I want abundance. But implicit in that thought is the reality that you don't have abundance. The thought itself is declaring the absence of the very thing you desire. You think, I want to be successful. But that thought is rooted in the consciousness of not being successful. You think, I want love. But the wanting itself is pushing love away because wanting comes from lack. The universe is a perfect mirror. It doesn't respond to your desires. It responds to your state of consciousness. And if your state of consciousness is one of wanting, lacking, hoping, or wishing, then the universe must reflect that state back to you perfectly. You will continue to be in a state of wanting. The thought of desire actually perpetuates the reality of lack. This is why your thoughts do nothing. Behrend discovered that there is a vast chasm between thinking about what you want and the mystical moment where that thought transforms into creative power. Most people spend their entire lives on the wrong side of that chasm, wondering why nothing changes despite all their positive thinking. She wrote, "The spirit of opulence is within us. The way to bring it into manifestation is to think it, feel it, and live it continually." Notice the progression. Think, feel, live. Most people stop at think. Some advance to feel, but they feel longing, which is still separation. Almost no one reaches the third level, to live it. To live it means to exist in a state where the thought is no longer future or distant. It has collapsed into the eternal now. This is the mystical moment we're seeking. But here's what makes this so challenging. You cannot force this moment. You cannot manufacture it through willpower. You cannot think your way into it because it exists beyond thought. It requires a kind of inner alchemy, a transformation of consciousness that occurs in a space between effort and surrender. Behrend herself experienced this when she was trying to manifest the money to travel to England. She didn't strain. She didn't beg the universe. She didn't repeat affirmations mechanically. Instead, she entered a state of consciousness where the journey to Troward was already real. Not real in the future, but real now. She could feel the presence of it so completely that there was no longer any separation between her and the fulfilled desire. And then the mystical moment occurred. Within weeks, the exact amount of money she needed, £20, came to her through completely unexpected channels. Not because she thought about it, but because she had undergone the transformation. She had crossed the invisible bridge. The question now becomes, what is this bridge? What actually happens in this mystical moment that transforms powerless thought into creative force? The answer lies not in doing more, but in understanding the nature of consciousness itself. And that's where most people get lost because they're looking for a technique when what's required is a revelation. Transition to Chapter 2. The revelation that thought and reality are not two separate things waiting to be connected, but one thing appearing as two. And the moment you truly grasp this, not intellectually but in the depths of your being, everything changes. Let me show you what I mean. The collapse of separation. There's a story Behrend tells in her writings that reveals the deepest mystical truth about consciousness. She describes how she once needed to manifest a specific sum of money within a specific time frame. She had tried everything: visualization, affirmations, positive thinking. Nothing worked. The deadline approached, and still nothing. Then one evening, sitting quietly in her room, something shifted. She stopped trying to get the money. She stopped visualizing it coming to her. She stopped thinking about it at all. Instead, she simply rested in a state of knowing that in the invisible realm, in what Troward called the universal mind, there was no lack. Money wasn't something outside of her that she needed to attract. Money was simply crystallized consciousness, and consciousness was infinite. In that moment of stillness, something extraordinary happened. The separation between her and the money collapsed. There was no her wanting money. There was only consciousness, appearing as both the observer and the observed, the desirer and the desired. The next morning, the exact amount she needed arrived through a source she never would have anticipated. This is the mystical moment we've been seeking. It's not a moment in time, but a moment in consciousness. It's the instant when subject and object merge into one, when the illusion of separation dissolves, when you stop being someone who wants something and become the consciousness in which that thing already exists. Behrend called this entering into the spirit of the thing desired. But what does that actually mean? How do you enter into the spirit of something? This is where most teachings on manifestation fail, because they give you techniques without giving you understanding. They tell you to visualize, to affirm, to feel, but they don't tell you what actually happens in consciousness when these techniques work. Let me illuminate this mystery. Everything in your physical reality is consciousness in form. The chair you're sitting on is consciousness vibrating at a certain frequency, appearing as wood or metal or fabric. Your body is consciousness appearing as flesh and bone. Money is consciousness appearing as paper, or numbers in an account. Your relationships are consciousness appearing as interactions with apparent others. But here's the key. Consciousness is not separate from these forms. The forms are not objects that consciousness creates from a distance. Consciousness is the forms. They are consciousness knowing itself in infinite ways. When you think, I want money, you're creating a mental separation between consciousness as you and consciousness as money. You're dividing the indivisible. And because the universe is one unified field of consciousness, it cannot respond to this divided state. It can only reflect it back to you. You remain separate from money. But when you enter into the spirit of abundance, when you actually become the consciousness of abundance, something mystical occurs. The separation collapses. There is no longer you and abundance. There is only abundance being conscious of itself. And the physical form must follow, because form always follows consciousness. This is why Behrend emphasizes the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But she's not talking about emotional feeling in the ordinary sense. She's talking about the subjective sensation of being the thing, not wanting the thing. Imagine you're an actor preparing for a role. If you stand outside the character thinking about how the character would act, your performance will be hollow. But when you fully embody the character, when you think their thoughts, feel their feelings, see through their eyes, you are the character. There's no separation. This is what method actors call living the role. This is exactly what you must do with your desires. You must live the role of the person who already has what you seek. Not pretend, not fake it, but actually shift your state of consciousness so completely that you are that person. Behrend writes, "We do not receive that which we ask for in our prayers, but that which we unconsciously or consciously visualize, or that which corresponds to the mental picture we habitually hold in our mind." Notice the word habitually. This is crucial. The mystical moment we're exploring isn't a one-time event. It's a state of consciousness you must inhabit repeatedly until it becomes your natural dwelling place. Most people visualize what they want for a few minutes each day, then spend the remaining 23 hours and 55 minutes dwelling in the consciousness of lack. They wonder why visualization doesn't work. It's because consciousness is not moved by temporary states but by habitual states. The mystical moment occurs when your new state becomes more real to you than your current circumstances. When the consciousness of abundance feels more natural than the consciousness of lack. When the identity of the successful person is more familiar than the identity of the struggling person. This requires a kind of faith that goes beyond religious faith. It's not belief in an external God who might grant your wishes. It's recognition of yourself as the very consciousness that creates and sustains all form. Behrend learned this directly from Troward, who taught that each individual mind is a unique center of divine consciousness, with all the creative power of the universal mind flowing through it. Think about this deeply. If you are a center of divine consciousness, then your thoughts are not small personal mental events. They are movements of the infinite creative power of the universe. But that power remains latent until you recognize it, claim it, and consciously direct it. The moment of recognition is the mystical moment. It's when you stop seeing yourself as a limited human trying to manipulate an external universe and start recognizing yourself as consciousness itself, taking form according to your habitual mental dwelling place. But here's where it gets even more profound and more practical. This recognition alone isn't enough. You must do something with it. You must cross from recognition into a specific kind of action. Not physical action first, but a sacred inner action that Behrend discovered through her own mystical experiences. Transition to Chapter 3. This inner action is what separates those who understand these principles intellectually from those who actually transform their lives. It's the bridge between knowing and being, between philosophy and power. And it requires something of you that you may have never given before, the sacred act of assumption. In the winter of 1912, after Genevieve Behrend successfully manifested her journey to England and became Troward's student, she faced an even greater test. She had reached the master, but now she had to truly understand and embody his teachings at the deepest level. Troward gave her a practice that would become the cornerstone of her entire philosophy. A practice so simple that most people dismiss it, yet so profound that it contains all creative power. He taught her the sacred act of assumption. Assumption is not hoping, wishing, or wanting. It's not even visualizing or affirming. Assumption is the act of taking your seat in the consciousness of the wish fulfilled and refusing to move from that seat, regardless of what your physical senses tell you. This is the mystical moment in its fullest expression, and it requires something that most people are unwilling to give: unwavering commitment to the invisible truth over the visible lie. Let me explain what I mean by this. Right now, your physical senses are reporting data to you. You look at your bank account and see a certain number. You look at your relationships and see a certain situation. You look at your body and see a certain condition. Your senses say, this is reality. This is what's true. This is what's real. But Behrend learned from Troward that your senses are not reporting reality. They're reporting history. They're showing you the outpictured results of your past states of consciousness. What you see now was created by who you were being in consciousness days, weeks, months, or even years ago. This is the shocking truth that most people never grasp. Your current circumstances are not your current reality. They're your past reality showing up in the present. Your true current reality is the state of consciousness you're dwelling in right now, which is busy creating your future circumstances. The sacred act of assumption is choosing to give more reality to your desired state of consciousness than to your current circumstances. It's dwelling in the feeling of the wish fulfilled with such loyalty, such devotion, such unwavering faith, that your current circumstances become nothing more than shadows that you know will soon dissolve. Behrend writes, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Not faith in the sense of blind belief, but faith as substantial reality." The invisible state you're assuming is more substantial, more real than the visible conditions you're experiencing. This is where most people fail. They assume their desired state for a few minutes during meditation or visualization. Then they open their eyes, see their unchanged circumstances, and immediately drop the assumption. They return to dwelling in the consciousness of their current conditions. They may return to the assumption later, but the gap, the time spent believing in the evidence of the senses, undoes all the work. It's like trying to heat water to boiling. You apply heat for a minute, then remove the heat for 10 minutes, then apply it again briefly, then remove it for an hour. The water never boils. You need sustained, continuous heat. Similarly, you need sustained, continuous assumption of your desired state. But here's what makes this both challenging and miraculous. Assumption is an act of creation, not an act of manipulation. You're not trying to change something outside of you. You're not trying to bend circumstances or manipulate outcomes. You're simply choosing the state of consciousness you will dwell in, knowing that consciousness is the only reality, and form must follow. When Behrend needed to manifest her prosperity, she didn't focus on specific amounts of money or particular circumstances. Instead, she assumed the consciousness of opulence. She lived in the feeling of abundance as her natural state. She moved through her day as someone who had unlimited resources. She made decisions from that consciousness. She spoke from that consciousness. She thought from that consciousness. And the outer world had no choice but to conform to her inner state. This is the mystical law: as within, so without, as above, so below. Your outer world is always a perfect mirror of your inner state, always, without exception. The circumstances you see are the shadows cast by your consciousness. Change the light, your consciousness, and the shadows must change. But here's the secret within the secret. You cannot assume a state you don't believe is available to you. This is why so many people fail at assumption. They try to assume being wealthy while deeply believing that wealth is for other people, not them. They try to assume being loved while believing they're unlovable. They try to assume being healthy while identifying as a sick person. The assumption collapses because it's built on a foundation of contrary belief. This is where Behrend's teachings go even deeper. She understood that before you can successfully assume a new state, you must first recognize your true nature. You must understand that you are not a limited human being trying to get something from an external universe. You are consciousness itself, infinite, unlimited, creative consciousness, temporarily experiencing life through the lens of a particular personality. Once you truly recognize this, not intellectually but as a lived knowing, everything changes, because then you realize that nothing is being withheld from you. There's nothing you need to earn or deserve or become worthy of. Every possible state of consciousness is already available to you because you are consciousness. Assuming a new state is simply choosing to view reality through a different lens. It's like changing the channel on a television. Every channel exists simultaneously. You're not creating the channel by tuning into it. You're simply selecting which channel to experience. Your current life is one channel. Your desired life is another channel. Both exist simultaneously in the infinite field of consciousness. Assumption is the dial that changes the channel. But here's where courage comes in. To truly assume a new state, you must be willing to abandon the old state completely. You can't have one foot in each world. You can't dwell in prosperity while clinging to poverty consciousness, just in case. You can't assume perfect health while still identifying as a person with a chronic condition. You must make a complete transfer of allegiance from what is to what you're choosing to experience. This requires a kind of inner death and rebirth. The old identity must die so the new identity can fully live. Transition to Chapter 4. And this is where we arrive at the most mystical, most powerful, most transformative teaching of all. Because there's one final element that brings everything together. One secret that Behrend discovered through years of practice that makes assumption not just possible, but inevitable. It's the element that transforms struggle into grace, effort into flow, becoming into already being. The eternal now, where all power lives. In her most profound writings, Genevieve Behrend speaks of a moment that changed everything for her. She had been practicing assumption, dwelling in desired states, visualizing outcomes. She had experienced many successes, but she still felt there was something more, some final key that would unlock the deepest level of creative power. Then one day, in a moment of deep meditation, she experienced what she could only describe as a collapse of time itself. She realized that there is no future moment when your desire will be fulfilled. There is no past moment that created your current limitations. There is only now, and in the eternal now, everything already exists. All states of being, all possibilities, all versions of reality exist simultaneously in this present moment. This was the final mystical revelation. The moment that makes your thoughts work is always now. Not now as a point on a timeline between past and future, but now as the eternal presence where all creation occurs. Let me take you deep into this mystery, because understanding this will transform everything. When you think about your desire as something that will happen in the future, you're actually pushing it away from you. The future never comes. Tomorrow never arrives. When tomorrow comes, it's today. You live perpetually in now, and if your desired state is always in the future, it remains forever out of reach. Similarly, when you think about your current limitations as having been caused by your past, you're giving power to something that no longer exists. The past is gone. It has no power over you except the power you give it by continuing to dwell in those old states of consciousness. The only time that exists is now. The only place where your creative power lives is now. And the mystical secret is this. In the now, you can choose any state of consciousness you desire, and that state is immediately real, not as a future potential, but as a present reality. Behrend learned to practice what she called living from the end. Not moving toward the end, but living from it. This is subtle but crucial. Most people visualize their desired outcome and then return to their current state, hoping that the visualization will somehow cause them to move toward that outcome. This is living toward the end. But living from the end means you assume the consciousness of already being there. You don't imagine yourself becoming successful. You imagine from the perspective of already being successful, looking back at this current moment. You don't try to feel how it will feel when you're loved. You feel how it feels now, because in consciousness, you already are loved. This is the sacred practice of Neville Goddard, who studied similar teachings, when he said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and continue in that assumption, and that which you assume you already are." Notice that which you assume you already are. Not will be, not might be, already are. This is the mystical moment fully activated. It's the collapse of time, the dissolution of becoming, the recognition that in consciousness, which is the only reality, you already are what you're choosing to be. But here's the profound implication that most people miss. If you already are it in consciousness, then there's nothing to strive for. There's no future moment of achievement. There's nothing to earn or deserve or become worthy of. You simply dwell in the state, and the physical form arranges itself to match your dwelling place. This removes all struggle, all anxiety, all desperate wanting from the process. You're not trying to get anything. You're simply being what you choose to be, and you're allowing the physical world to catch up to your chosen state. Behrend describes this as living in the spirit of opulence, or the consciousness of plenty. It's not about having specific things. It's about dwelling in a state where abundance is your natural atmosphere, where prosperity is simply who you are, where success is your native condition. And from that state, specific things, circumstances, opportunities, and people naturally flow into your experience. Not because you're making them happen, but because you've become the type of consciousness that naturally experiences those things. This is why Behrend emphasizes joy and gratitude as essential elements, not as techniques to attract good things, but as the natural qualities of consciousness when it recognizes its own abundance. When you truly understand that you already are what you desire to be, joy arises naturally. Gratitude flows effortlessly. You're not grateful for what you hope to receive. You're grateful for what you already are. The mystical moment, then, is this eternal now where you consciously choose your state of being. It's the moment where you stop waiting, stop trying, stop becoming, and simply are. In this moment, time stops. Past and future collapse into presence. Subject and object merge into one. The observer and the observed become a single consciousness knowing itself. And in that unified field of awareness, your desired state is not something you will experience. It's something you are experiencing right now, in the only moment that exists. This is why your thoughts did nothing before. Because you were thinking about your desires from a separated consciousness. You were projecting them into an imaginary future, giving power to an illusory past, living in the consciousness of lack while hoping for abundance. But now in this moment, as you truly grasp this teaching, everything can change. Not in some future moment, but right now. Because now is where you choose your state. Now is where you assume your identity. Now is where consciousness creates form. Behrend's final teaching is simple, yet contains everything. Think, feel, and live the life you desire to live, and the law of attraction will faithfully bring you the means for the attainment of your desires. Think it. Recognize it in consciousness. Feel it. Assume the feeling of already being it. Live it. Dwell in that state as your natural condition right now. And the mystical moment? It's not a single instant you're waiting for. It's every instant you choose to dwell in your chosen state. It's happening right now as you read these words. It's the eternal present where consciousness knows itself, creates itself, experiences itself in infinite forms. You are not a limited being hoping for change. You are consciousness itself, choosing which aspect of its infinite nature to experience. And that choice is available to you right now, and now, and now, in every eternal moment. The question is not, when will your thoughts work? The question is, which thoughts will you dwell in right now in this mystical, eternal, creative moment of now? Genevieve Behrend went from having nothing to manifesting everything she desired, not through struggle, but through understanding this mystical truth. She became one of the only personal students of Thomas Troward. She built prosperity beyond measure. She taught thousands of people these principles, and she did it all by discovering the mystical moment, the eternal now where your consciousness creates your reality. That moment is not somewhere in your future. It's here. It's now. It's always been now. The only question is, what will you assume in this moment? If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. Subscribe for more mystical teachings that actually work. And remember, your thoughts are working right now, creating the exact state of consciousness you're dwelling in. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose now.